right, welcome to the newest slash first episode of this channel. I know I posted my welcome video like 3 months ago, and then we ended up moving about 7 hours away from our hometown, and life was hectic, and trying to get settled into a new home and all of these things. So I finally am at a place where I can just focus on creating content for the Endo warriors out there. So I want to start off the first video with my story because I do believe that it is very important for everyone who comes to my channel to understand who I am and why I have the knowledge that I do, to help you, and why I believe that I'm very qualified to help everyone achieve a life where they can live pretty freaking normally. So my journey began when I was 13. At the time of this recording, that would have been 22 years ago, roughly, give or take. And it started with my first period. And of course, after the first couple, when things start working their way out, those ones are whatever. And then when the first real period came, it was so heavy. And I remember right from the get-go, like before I even started wearing tampons, like my pads were this thick and I could barely get through an entire class at school without leaking. And that was what I thought was normal. After a little while, they started to get really, really painful, to the point where when I was on my period, I remember a lot of times just laying, sometimes not even on my couch. Like we had like those armchairs that would rock, those old, beautiful ones from like the 80s and 90s that were flowers and stuff. And I just remember curling up on a ball in that seat, not moving for hours because I was in so much pain. And I remember my mom just like so concerned because she didn't know what was going on. She, didn't have anything like that. And after a few times of that happening, especially a few months in a row, I remember she started taking me to doctors. And of course, it's the same thing that we're still being told to this day, that, you need a higher pain tolerance, and this is normal. And like all of these things that just made you feel like you were a hypochondriac, like it was all in your head. And of course, when you're younger, at first, you're not really talking about it with your friends. And it wasn't until a couple years later that I had a really, really good close friend. And her and she actually lived with us for a little while. And her periods were like 3 days long. And she could wear a tampon for hours without any issues. And I'm like, that's when I kind of started questioning, like, why isn't mine so heavy? But again, like, of course, we've been going to doctors constantly, and this is normal. This is normal. Your pain tolerance is really low, blah, 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 blah. And when I was 16, they finally put me on birth control, because they were just so heavy. Like a lot of times I wouldn't be able to make it through a full class. And sometimes you had teachers that wouldn't let you go. And of course, after the class is done, your pants are soaked in blood and now you're stuck at school. What do you do, right? Like how fucking embarrassing is that? And yeah, so that was kind of that. It's like the typical story. I never had pain outside of my periods at that point. It was just my periods. So I never questioned that it wasn't actually normal. And I got pregnant at a very young age. I got pregnant with my first daughter. I was 19. And I had her 2 months before my 20th birthday. And when she was about 3 or 4 months old, that's when I had my first bout of pain outside of my period. That's the first time that anything outside of my period had happened. And my mother-in-law at the time, I'm not with my first daughter's father anymore, but my mother-in-law at the time had come over for coffee and to visit and stuff. And I remember I was pouring coffee, and I believe I was walking back to put the coffee back, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And I just remember the pain hitting in my right ovary so hard and so fast, it dropped me to the ground. And I remember like barely being able to breathe. I was in so much pain. And she took me to the hospital. Of course, they ran blood work and x-rays and ultrasounds and like all of these things and found nothing, of course. And so they sent me home and said, if it happens again, come back. And a month or two later, it happened again. So I went back and they ran all the exact same tests, nothing different. And they just said, oh, it's probably the cysts on your ovary and they're probably just popping. I'm like, oh, okay. So of course, I'm not questioning it. That seems normal. It seems normal. So I went on my way and just kind of left it at that. Um, when my daughter was about 9 months old, I left her dad and I moved back home to my hometown. And so, of course, I seen a different doctor. It was like 2, maybe 3 months after we moved home, I got the pain again, but it was on the other side this time. It was on my left side. And so I went to a different doctor than I had been seeing. And I had explained everything that I had done and like the emergency visits and all the things and what they had said. And I said, but now it's on my other side. So I'm kind of concerned. And that was the first time I heard the word endometriosis. He said, I think you have endometriosis. I'm going to send you to a specialist in the city. And specialist is because there was no endo specialist back then. He was a gynecologist. He's actually the gynecologist that delivered my second daughter. Amazing delivery doctor. Horrible endo doctor. He knew nothing about the disease. Maybe that's different now, but I mean, this was years ago. So I was, about I was still 20 at the time when I first went to go see him, and then, or I just turned 21. Sorry, so that was in September, the year that I was 21, and I ended up getting in on a cancellation that following January for a laparoscopic surgery. And it made me so angry because I had just woken up from surgery, and like luckily I had a family member with me that was able to relay all the information to me later. But I literally had just woken up. I was groggy. I hadn't even gone to the bathroom yet. I could barely keep my eyes open. And he was trying to show me pictures of my ovaries, how the endo on my ovaries. He was talking my ear off. I'm like, I have no idea what this guy's saying. I cannot comprehend anything. I can't even barely see the pictures. I'm like squinting with one eye, like trying to see this. And then he just leaves. And that really irritated me. And like, I did have a follow up appointment with him after, but like, could you not have at least waited? Anyways, so I go for my follow up appointment, and of course, I get told the same thing that many of us have been told still to this day, that there's nothing you can do about it. And when you're done having kids, come back and I'll give you a hysterectomy and you'll be cured. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so hysterectomy, you'll be cured, blah, 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 blah. And I've told this story lots. And of course, if you follow me on other channels like Instagram, you've heard my story before. But back then, having endometriosis was a literal death sentence. If you were lucky enough to get to menopause before the endo grew onto your lungs, you would survive and you'd be fine and you would have little pain. But back then, it came in 4 stages, and that was it. There was only the 4 stages. There wasn't types. There wasn't anything like that. It was 4 stages, and it went from just being on your ovaries, and the 4th stage was it went on your lungs, and this happened to everyone. And if it did, and if it happened too quickly, that it would eventually kill you because of the scar tissue on your lungs. We know obviously now that that's not true, but for years I was terrified thinking that I was served a very slow death sentence, and it was horrible for many years. It very much sucked. Um, and eventually, obviously, I figured out that that is not the case. Thankfully, it can still go on your lungs, but it's not. It doesn't happen to every single person who has endometriosis. Yeah, so anyway, so then a couple of years after I got diagnosed was when I started figuring out that food was involved, because at the time Google was not something that you just pulled up on your phone. You had to actually sit down on a computer still, and so just Googling things wasn't as easy and convenient as it is now. So it took a couple of years and someone mentioning something to me that I started looking into foods and realized that about 90% of my diet was made up of trigger foods. And that kind of slowly began my journey. Now, I did have a hysterectomy and excision surgery, March of 2020. And that for me was a choice that I was okay with. The excision surgery was amazing, but I will tell you that excision surgery is not a cure. It's a short period of time, and it varies for each person who gets it. That gives you relief. But if you're not dealing with the hormone imbalances and the excess estrogen in your body, it's going to grow back. And the more hormonal imbalances and the more excess estrogen you have in your body, the faster it is going to grow back in your body. But it does give you a small window of relief where you kind of feel invincible and you think that you're going to be fine, and then you're not. The hysterectomy was a very personal decision for me that I am still to this day very much okay with. I mean, I've had my moments where I do wish we could have more kids. But even if I hadn't got my hysterectomy, my second pregnancy was so painful and I had so many complications. My uterus was so weak because of all the scar tissue. I don't think that I would have been able to have another child. I don't think that it would have been a safe option for me. Um, so I'm okay with it. I was in a lot of pain. My periods were still quite heavy. I was starting to figure out how to lessen my period pain and lessen the heaviness. And obviously, I still apply those practices now, and I do teach people about that because I do understand all of that. But for me personally, getting a hysterectomy was not a wrong choice. Um, but I do want to preface that with saying that if you don't feel that's the right choice for you, you still want to have kids, or you just don't want to give up that part of your body, then don't. Don't let anyone pressure you or bully you into it. But for me, it was 100% an okay choice. Um, yeah, and then for the last couple of years, I have been really working on bettering myself, learning how to live with this disease, learning how to be as pain free as possible. And I've achieved that. I very rarely have flare ups. And when I do, it's because I overindulge in crap foods that I shouldn't be eating, which we all do from time to time. It's human. But I do know how to reset my body back to what it needs to be in order to not have the pain. And I can't do everything that everyone else can do. Like I took my youngest daughter, to the jump park, and if you don't know what that is, it's a massive building filled with just trampolines and you're jumping around. And we only went for an hour and I was fine all day. And then that evening, I ended up with a massive flare up, um, specifically inside of my vagina. Hopefully, I don't get edited out for that. I don't know how YouTube works yet. And I was in a lot of pain that night. And then I had to go through all my protocols of like reducing the pain and blah, 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 blah. So there's still a lot of things that I can't do, but I live a fairly normal life and I don't have to worry about, making plans in advance. When I cancel, it's because I feel like an old lady and I don't like to leave my house past 8 o'clock at night. And when I make plans for past 8 o'clock at night, it's when I'm feeling really sociable. But when the night comes, and I'm usually like, oh, I can't do this. I want to go to bed. But 99% of the time, it has nothing to do with my endo. Absolutely nothing. So that is what this channel is going to be about, guys. I want to show you guys how to do it because it is possible. It just takes time and it takes a lot of dedication. It takes pushing through even when you don't want to because it's easier not to. I have worked to become a holistic nutritionist so that I have the most knowledge possible to help everyone with. And obviously, I want to give away a lot of free content as I can, but I do offer one-on-one consultations. I offer a coaching program if you want just a one-off where we can kind of go through your diet, things like that. Absolutely, feel free to reach out to me. Go onto my Instagram, send me a message, send me an email, however you want to go do about that. I will be adding more links in the future here, depending on when you're watching this, where you can directly just book in with me. I'm not there yet. I'm still working on figuring out all of this being a business owner thing. But yeah, and I'm a yoga instructor. I've only done my 200 hour, but I find with what I want to use it for, I don't need the whole package. And maybe one day I will go for my extra 300 hours where I can give you more advanced poses. But right now, all I want this to be for is to help you get from being stuck in a ball to stretching those muscles back out. Doing gentle movements where we don't need to be in some crazy yoga poses to do. I want to help you support your detox process, pathways throughout your body, help your body get rid of all the excess that it's holding on to, all the toxins that you've accumulated through your lifetime, all the things, and help you figure out the things that you think might be okay for your body, but actually aren't. You know, one of the things that I've learned in the last little while is I don't believe that gluten itself is the trigger. I believe that the toxins within the store bought bread products we're buying is the trigger. I've been making homemade bread now for months, months and months and months. And there are times where I indulge a lot. And when I buy store bought bread and I eat it, even one piece, 2 or 3 days in a row, I'll have a flare. When I have homemade bread, I've eaten 2 to 3 pieces every day, 4 or 5 days in a row, zero issues. So I don't believe that it's actually the gluten. And I've done it with both high quality um, flour and lower quality flour. I always go for the unbleached stuff, but I've even bought the Robin Hood brand, which is what I'm using right now just because it adds up when you're buying a small bag for 20 bucks versus a big bag for, $15. It adds up over time financially. And that's one thing I want to do is I'm experimenting with different things as well because I want to be able to give you guys things that aren't going to cost you an arm and a leg to do, um, to be able to enjoy the things that you want to enjoy. But again, like I've been using lower quality flour and I'm still not having any flare ups and I've been eating it every day. And so it's really not necessarily what we're eating, it's the quality of what we're eating and the amount of chemicals and preservatives and all of these things that don't need to be in there that are in there. Okay, so I'm going to stop here because this was supposed to be an about me and I'm getting on another rant. And I will see you guys in the next video. And as always, like, subscribe, share this if you want to share it. And comment below. Tell me what you want to learn about, what your ailments are, so that I can create content for specifically what you guys are looking for. I'm not wanting to create and create and create, and you guys are like, oh, this doesn't apply to me. This is crap. I don't care about this. I already know about this. Tell me what you guys want to learn about because I am here for the journey and I want to make sure that this is the most valuable information for you that I could possibly provide. So anyways, I'm going to end it here and I will see you guys on the next video. Bye.